Well, let's just take the questions.
Okay. So you got what do you? So the first question today is from Nam Bhajan.
Bhajan.
Yeah.
Let's just take the question.
Sorry, yeah. Nam Bhajan in Colombia. He sent this last week. Are there demigods in the uppercut lila?
Yes, of course.
Next.
It's uppercut, which means unmanifested or invisible, but it's also called, this is another word, aprakrita. Aprakrita means it looks like the material world, but it's not. So those elements are there, excuse me, devas and so forth, but they're all devotees. Excuse me. And the inhabitants of Vrindavan, they pray to the demigods also. So that's it's in itself an interesting point, because we are told in the Gita that worship of the devas rather than worship of Krishna is not very bright, not very intelligent, because he's the source and they can't give any blessing without him. That's, of course, the logic of that. And it's quite good logic. But at the same time, all the names of the devas, they are really names of Krishna. They speak about qualities that Krishna himself possesses, and they are personifications of particular qualities and abilities, powers, daivanetrena, controlling influences over nature. So the posts themselves, even in this world, are divine. And then those who inhabit the posts or who are posted in the posts, you can post me on that. They're empowered by the post. So the post itself is a feature of divinity, a feature of Krishna, an aspect of his power, his qualities, and so forth in this world. So certainly those powers and qualities are present in the spiritual world, in Goloka also. But they're not, there isn't a materially, if you will, conditioned jiva that inhabits the posts or that whatever accepts the posts and so forth. So the pure power itself. That's one way, of course, of explaining, and the other is that, as I said earlier, sometimes they're explained to be present, but they're devotees. Same idea. The personification of those posts, those powers itself. And because the lila of Krishna is human-like, then we find that the inhabitants are followers of the Varnashram system. They worship the Devas, which is largely based on worshiping the Devas for material betterment, material gain, and so forth. But then they all worship the Devas, but they do it in Krishna consciousness. Probably the most prominent and endearing example is that of the Kumaris, the young girls who worshipped Katyayani, goddess Durga, to get Krishna as their husband. So in material life, while you might worship her to get a good husband, or maybe to get a good wife as well, they're doing so with the idea, and that, of course, that manifests in the Prakat Lila also. There are different opinions about those Kumaris. Some acharyas say that they're sadhana siddhas, some say that they're nitya siddhas, but The point being that they're worshiping a deva, but entirely within Krishna consciousness, right? With a desire to have Krishna as their husband, or Nanda Baba, Yashoda Mai, petitioning Narayan or other devas in different circumstances for the protection of their son and so forth. So yeah, they play a prominent role in that environment, without which it wouldn't be as charming, human-like, and different in that regard from Vaikuntha, which is overtly transcendental and another world altogether. The famous example of the Bhagavad Lila, of course, is that Krishna was asked in a Prakat Lila on earth by his family members and intimate circle, after he had saved Nanda Maharaj from the depths of the ocean, where he had been dragged to the bottom of by the attendants of what's his
Varuna.
Neptune, I wanted to say, but I knew that was Greek. Yeah, Varuna, same idea. To saved from the clutches of Varuna, who incidentally glorified Krishna as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. It's a beautiful verse. But anyway, they asked him after that testimony of Nanda, what happened to him? Like, that your son must be very special. So let's ask him what our next life will be, which is everybody's concern. And of course, Krishna showed them the Aprakat Lila, and everything was fine, just like it was here. Their friends were there, the families were there, so Krishna was there. Everything, we lived happily ever after, if you will, with our friends and family, which is what everybody wants to do. So the Aprakat Lila is not overtly transcendental. It's I would say it's sometimes referred to as a Deva Lila, as opposed to the Nara Lila. And I've often described the Nara Lila as this human-like Lila on location, because it's filmed, if you will, or the dramatic performance. The stage for that is actually human society on earth, with all of its faults and so forth, weaknesses, shortcomings, and so forth. Whereas the Aprakat Lila is sometimes referred to as the Deva Lila, so it has a little more opulence to it. The Kadamba trees are bigger, it's said, more overtly, like you wouldn't find on earth, something like that, particularly. A little more transcendent. We have the beautiful description of the Aprakat Lila in Gopal Champu, written by Jiva Goswami, where in the setting of the Champu is the Aprakat Lila. In the context of the associates there, reflecting on the Nara Lila, the Prakat Lila, and Krishna in the retelling of their lives, which speaks to us about the virtues of the Prakat Lila, and how even those in the Aprakat Lila may meditate on the Prakat Lila, while those in the Prakat Lila are meditating, or the sadhakas at least, on attaining the Aprakat Lila. These are described, I think, by Prabodhananda Saraswati as tadatmya. They're non-different, the two. It means the bhavas are the same. So yes, there's some representation of the devas there. Must be. All right, what else?
The next question's from Peter from Slovakia. He's a friend of Harijan.
Friend of Harijan is a friend of mine.
Peter sent this question. What is the interrelation between Bhagavan, jiva or atma, and Brahman. How do they coexist together? In one lecture, Bhagavad Gita 2:12, March 5th, 1973, Prabhupada states the following. So the sunshine is a combination of small atomic shining particles. So that's the comparison. The shining atomic particles and the sun globe, very great difference. Similarly, we are also small particles of the same quality as God. Just like the shining particle, the sunshine is a combination of shining particles. Quite interesting. Sorry, that's the end of the quote. Quite interesting because the impersonal Brahman feature of the Lord is also compared to the sunshine, yet according to these statements, the jiva is a particle of that sunshine. Does that mean that Brahman is the sum total of all jivas, or is Brahman only a totality of jivas in the impersonal state, being merged in Brahman? But jiva is always qualitatively Brahman, even while its personal existence is manifest. So I really don't know what to think about it. Can you please share your thoughts on this topic?
Yes, I don't think I can recall Brahman, which in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in Gaudiya Vedanta, is thought to be a feature of the Absolute, along with two others, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti Shabdate. Verse from the Bhagavatam. It happens to be correspond with the verse that Varuna cited that I just mentioned, where Krishna is glorified as being Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Typically, the term Brahman in the sutras of Vyas refers to the Godhead. Whether the Godhead is personal or impersonal depends on the commentary. So sometimes we may use the word Brahman and we mean Bhagavan, but in Gaudiya Vedanta, this Brahman feature, I don't recall it being compared to the sunshine, but it's readily compared to the halo of Bhagavan, the effulgence of Bhagavan. That said, it's true that the jivas are referred to as like particles of sun. If you take the sun globe, then there's an internal combustion within the sun globe, movement, explosions. Let's call it emotional explosions of the Absolute. This is his inner life. Often the sun is, in some cultures, is thought to be divine or a way of thinking of God, thinking of the sun, because we're so dependent upon the sun. And so we worship the sun, we regard the sun, we need the sun for light, for heat, for growing, for a peaceful mind, and so on and so forth. But interestingly enough, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we look at, when we compare Krishna, Godhead, to the sun globe, our concern is not so much with how and to what extent that globe is maintaining us, but what's going on inside the globe. What are those nuclear explosions? The emotional life of inner life of the Absolute is our interest and preoccupation. But the explosions, if you will, of his emotional life are not constrained to the globe itself. Therefore, they proceed out as the jivas, innumerable jivas. This is the analogy, of course. And it just like, to follow through on that analogy, you have the globe, the sun rays coming out, and the rays create an illusion, for example, of color. So in that analogy, then that illusion would be the material existence that the jivas, the sparks, can get caught up in, if you will. And so that said, the word you use the word atma and the word jiva. Sometimes they're used to refer to the same thing, but sometimes they're used differently, with jiva referring to the materially conditioned state of the atma, the self. So when you're reading, you have to look and see how it's being used. But Brahman, this feature of the Godhead, is considered by Shankar, Advaita Vedanta, probably the greatest advocates of this feature of the Absolute, to which they add no other feature and understand no other feature to exist. Ultimately, Brahman, this state, Brahman, if we look at it from Shankar's point of view, there is no other. Then Brahman has no experience. It doesn't experience bliss. It is bliss. That's obviously very abstract. They identify it with Brahman with an aspect of the jiva that we also acknowledge, but they don't acknowledge another important aspect of the jiva, or the atma, I should say. Let me explain. It said that the jiva is swarup gyan. Here the word gyan is being used in a particular way. It means that it's by its nature, the atma is conscious of itself. It's aware that it exists, but it's not aware of anything else. Not based on that quality. So Shankar says, of course, the atma is an illusion. The individual atma is an illusion, but swarup gyan, knowledge that it exists, is the nature of Brahman that the Atma is non-different from. Now, all the Vaishnava schools beg to differ and say that there is a difference between the Atma and the Paramatma. Sometimes a quantitative example is being used, part and parcel. One is the part, the spark, or the ray, and the other is the globe, the sun, or the fire, as the analogies may go. But in Vaishnava Vedanta, then we understand that not only is the jiva swarup gyan, means not inert, but aware of itself as its nature, but it also has what we call attributive knowledge, or it has the attribute of knowledge. To give an example that's used, there's a light in the room. So it's lighting itself. The fact that it illumines itself, we would call it swarup, that's its swarup gyan. But it also lights the room, sheds light on other things. So this is called, in Ramanuja's system, Dharma Bhuta Gyan. It's the Dharma, it's a characteristic, attribute, characteristic of the jiva. And in Gaudiya Vedanta, we call it Gyan Shakti. Jiva calls it Gyan Shakti. It's the exact same point he's making. And this Gyan Shakti, or this Dharma Bhuta Gyan, it is the capacity to know which one cannot possess without the content of knowledge. So the content of knowledge is, for example, there's an object of knowledge, the chair, and then there's the capacity to know. And the content is that knowing, chair, right? That's maybe the case, right? So according to the Vaishnava Vedanta, the jiva is not just consciousness that is aware only of itself, but it is also aware of other things by its attribute of knowledge. And this attribute of knowledge contracts under the influence of Maya Shakti. Let's say, for example, you have eyes, which we do, which we can see with, right? But in the dark, we could misconstrue a tree for a person. You don't see, so clearly. So this is the contracting then of our capacity to see under the influence of the darkness. So similarly, material knowledge, which in one sense is ignorance, in a broader sense, that gets in the way of knowing yourself, is the contracting of this Dharma Bhuta Gyan, or this Gyan Shakti, under the influence of Maya Shakti. And under the influence of Bhakti, and the culture of Bhakti, then this Dharma Bhuta Gyan, or Gyan Shakti, expands, and one becomes, in liberation, in mukti, all-knowing. This knowing is all-pervasive, because the all-knowing of the jiva is, in its omniscience, if you will, the mukta, is different at the same time from that of Bhagavan. Bhagavan, for example, has the knowledge of how to manifest universes. The jiva does not, although it's said to be omniscient. Jiva Goswami points out this difference between the two, as a way of saying that Krishna is the mukhya omniscient, the full base of omniscient. The jivas have some omniscience, but it's somewhat relative to what they are, if you will. But anyway, this Dharma Bhuta Gyan contracts or expands. You see, this is very different from the Advaita Vedanta perspective. It's through Dharma Bhuta Gyan, that's how we do things also, how we have feelings. It's all experiences and so forth. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has described this kind of knowledge of the self ultimately as bhakti. As it includes knowledge, Dharma Bhuta Gyan that we have. It may not be manifest, it may be unmanifest or contracted, but it includes knowledge of who we are as a servant of Krishna. It's in us. And with the bestowal further of bhakti, that knowledge, which in this sense can be compared to bhakti, bhakti is ultimately knowledge. It's the end of knowledge. Raja Vidya, Manmana Bhavavan Bhakto, Krishna says, the king of knowledge. Become my devotee, think of me. This, as it expands, and this inherent knowledge is known. To give an example, when we go to sleep, our knowledge contracts. When we wake up, it's there, it's manifest again. So the jiva inherently is full of knowledge. Like the Gita says in the 5th chapter, I think 15th, 16th verse, its knowledge is being covered. Everywhere this is stated, covered, hidden, lost, and so forth. But by the bestowal of bhakti, the inherent bhakti is activated, so to speak. And this knowledge expands. So the jiva, therefore, is different than the Brahman feature of the Absolute as described in Gaudiya Vedanta. or as described by Shankar. We acknowledge there is an undifferentiated manifestation of the absolute, an indeterminate, featureless, qualityless feature of the absolute. But we are part and parcel of Bhagavan. We come from the Paramatma, not from Brahman. Krishna, Narayan in Vaikuntha, he's full and complete, right? But Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that there's something missing, and there's the capacity there in Vaikuntha, in that domain, the capacity to bestow mukti, because everyone's a mukta. So should Narayan want to bestow mukti, well, there has to be a realm that corresponds with that. And of course he does, because it's his nature, he's compassionate. So the first avatar from Vaikuntha is Mahasankarshan, is Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is the avatar of Mahasankarshan. Mahasankarshan is the source of all the jivas, the shelter of Tatastha Shakti. When he avatars or descends into the Mayak realm, then he manifests jivas. But one becomes many. In the spiritual world, Mahasankarshan is becoming many. So there are many Nityasiddhas. And there are many conditioned jivas, buddha jivas, right? In the two realms, and the need for God in both. And he does the same in both places. Manifests many, that they may meet out of joy. He does so, out of bliss. You could say out of compassion, and as much as compassion is an overflow, it's not a lacking on someone's part. It's an overflow of fullness. So there's something what we call karuna rasa. Karuna rasa is like this mercy, this rasa of compassion. So Krishna can experience karuna rasa in Goloka because it's human-like. There, he can be the object of compassion for his parents when they think he's, in difficulty. Or his devotees can be the object of his karuna rasa, like his friends when they walked inside of Agasur's mouth. He starts to experience karuna rasa for them. Or it's possible that you can have karuna rasa for other friends, relatives, associates, people who aren't devotees. The example is Narada Muni. He was a rishi, and he had compassion for the rishis who attained Brahman, thinking, oh, they missed out. So he says, they missed out on what they could have attained. See what Brahma attained, he thought, in the Brahma Vimohan Lila, astounded as he was by recalling that, the grace bestowed upon Brahma. So, but in Vaikuntha, well, who's going to feel compassion towards Narayan? Like you could towards child Krishna, right? Who's Narayan going to feel compassion towards? I mean, he is compassionate towards everybody, but nobody's in any difficulty, which is where compassion really shows up, right? But Narayan has this desire to experience compassion in that way, karuna rasa. So for this reason, the Mahasankarshan is there. Or it's one way of looking at it from a rasic point of view. Why is there a world? Well, we're giving a rasic answer to that. So there may be a realm in which Narayan can express and experience karuna rasa. And Mahavishnu is the avatar of himself and manifests the world and the jivas. But the problem is that they're small. And so material nature gets in the way. And therefore he further descends in other avatars as Varaha and Kurma and Narasimha and so on and so. Ultimately, Krishna comes as if an avatar, although he's the avatari, along with Balaram, the Krishna Balaram avatar. And they manifest the Vedas and so on and so forth to deliver the people, to deliver them, to free them. So the point here is that the jivas are the expansion of the Paramatma. Now, the Paramatma has qualities. The supreme. We're talking about Mahavishnu here. Mahavishnu means that our source has qualities, unlike Brahman, in which qualities are not manifest. There's no Shakti manifest in Brahman, so there are no qualities there, no differentiation. So there's a likeness between ourselves and Brahman, but more so, or more accurately, when the word Brahman is used in a broad sense to refer to God, who has qualities, which is how, for example, Ramanuja or Madhva would use the term Brahman as opposed to Shankar. Now, we use the word Brahman kind of like Shankar to say there is this feature of undifferentiated, indeterminate manifestation of the absolute, who is determinate, who himself is full of all kinds of qualities. It's like his halo, right? But unlike Brahman, we have qualities. We have Gnatritva, Kartritva, Bhoktritva, Sheshatva. And the first three all serve the fourth, the latter. The fourth is we, by our very nature, are servants of Bhagavan. And we have knowledge, we have agency. We're an actor, we're a doer. And we're an experiencer. Brahman has no experience. There's nothing to experience in Brahman. There is no other. There's nothing to say. There's nothing to hear. There's nothing to do. To be. To be is a big thing, of course. Rather than to be under the threat, apparently, of not being. That I am is a big thing compared to I am a boy, I am a girl, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm an Indian, I'm Slovakian, I'm Polish, I'm Latin American. Those are small things that change, right? You can change your nation, your nationality, right? But that I am, that can't change. That's your Swarup Gyan that I referred to earlier. So I am is a big thing. Therefore, the Gyanis who attain Brahman, we can say it's a big thing compared to thinking I'm this or that. But as I want to say often, that I am a Gopa or I'm a Gopi is way bigger than I am. That's it. Whoa, that's a whole other dimension. And that's what you are by nature, a servant of Krishna. That's a big thing. And that, so you have qualities which makes you different from the Brahman feature. Now, the Atma, the Jiva, and is it God you were talking about or Brahman? Anyway, the difference, just briefly to conclude here, the difference between the Atma and the Jiva is the Jiva, if you want to differentiate between the two, as sometimes the scriptures do, the Jiva is immaterial life. Therefore, we could say things like, there's no bhakti in the Jiva. But that doesn't mean there's no bhakti in the Atma. Just like, for example, in the Upanishads, it said, it is impossible for the Jiva to have the what is it, eight qualities of the Paramatma. Like ability to have one fulfill all of one's desires by one's wish, Satya Sankalpa, I won't go into, there are others, I won't mention them for the moment. It's impossible for the jiva to have those qualities. Later, of course, the Upanishad says that these are the jiva's qualities. So how do we resolve this contradiction? Or they are the qualities of the Atma. Well, some of the scripture specifically says it is impossible for the jiva to have these 8 qualities of perfection. So let me say it another way. It is impossible for the jiva to have bhakti. Okay, now let's go back to the Upanishadic statement. What are those 8 qualities? Well, freedom from sin, freedom from hunger, freedom from death. Well, the jiva does not have freedom from death. The jiva does not have freedom from hunger. The jiva does not have freedom from thirst. The jiva doesn't have the capacity to fulfill all of its desires. But the Atma does. The Atma is free from death, right? The Atma has no hunger. The Atma has no thirst. You see, this is a powerful example in which the Upanishads are differentiating between the Atma and the jiva, referring to the latter as being the conditioned soul. Yes, the conditioned soul can't, as long as it's conditioned, it can't be free from death, it can't be free from hunger, it can't be free from thirst and so forth. But all these are inherent qualities of the Atma, nonetheless, right? The Atma is not going to ever be hungry. The Atma is never going to die. So this is an example of how sometimes we find things said about the jiva that are pertaining only to the Atma in its materially conditioned status, as opposed to the Atma itself, which is independent of its material conditioning, other than by the fact that it's identified erroneously with it. So that's jiva, that's Atma, and then there's Brahman or Bhagavan. So those are your question was kind of long. I hope I've covered everything there. If you're with us on the call and you want further clarification, speak up or write a note, and we'll continue the discussion. It is an interesting one.
I don't think he's on the call, That's fine.
That Dharma Bhuta Gyan we mentioned, is supposed as Swarup Gyan, or the attribute of Swarup Gyan, is very central to Vaishnavism. And although the Atma does not undergo transformation, you see, Shankar would say, well, how can there be knowledge in the jiva? Because knowledge undergoes transformations. And then the jiva would undergo transformation. But we accept that the jiva is knowledge contracting and expanding, for example, is not a transformation of the jiva, but it's something like, I'm a person, sometimes I'm sitting, sometimes I'm standing, sometimes I'm walking. These are not transformations of myself where I turn into something else. These are only, what would be the word? I forget the word to use, but they don't constitute transformations where I've transformed into something else. And we don't constrain the knowledge, the content of knowledge, to the antakarana, or there it will manifest. In other words, it will manifest in the subtle body, in the mind, the knowledge, but this knowledge is centered in the Atma itself. Therefore, for example, when you transcend material coverings, then if the knowledge you had acquired materially was only present in the Antakarana and not in yourself, how do you remember your previous lives like Narada does? Narada recalls 2 of his previous lives in the Bhagavatam. Gopakumar is recalling his entire previous life and so forth, as relating it to the Mathura Brahman and so forth. So it's an important point. Say that the jiva has knowledge. Okay, so let's go ahead. Long answer, but it's an interesting question.
The next question's from Karanam in Poland, Krishna Karanam.
Okay.
And he writes, Pranam, dear Guru Maharaj. My question concerns Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's explanation of the proper attitude for successful chanting of Harinam. He writes, quote, Krishna will appear of his own accord. He will descend upon your tongue, and then your tongue will be able to chant the name of Krishna. A gun that has no bullet, but only a blank, may make some sound, but no bullet is actually fired. Similarly, chanting the name of Krishna without an attitude of service produces sound, but that is only tongue deep. It is like firing a gun with blanks instead of bullets. Our chanting of the holy name of Krishna must be surcharged with a serving temperament, the tendency to satisfy Krishna. Otherwise, the sound we produce is bogus. It is only an imitation or a permutation. Unquote. Reading this explanation, one may begin to wonder to what extent the chanting of the holy name is effective and independent of other practices. Chanting is considered yuga dharma, a method for purifying and transforming the heart from a tendency to be the enjoyer to an attitude of service and giving pleasure. However, from this statement, it can be concluded that for chanting to be effective, one must already have a purified heart and thus a developed attitude of service. Sridhar Maharaj further explains that the method for developing a serving attitude can be developed through serving a Vaishnava. However, someone may be externally engaged in seva and still have a desire for lobha, puja, or pratishta. How then can such a person become purified? Thank you.
Well, it's another one, a long question. It's hard to remember everything that's in it, but first of all, the name. There are many statements to the effect that the name has power. What Pujapachita Maharaj is really talking about here is that in terms of attaining the full measure of the that which is contained in the name, Krishna himself, prem for Krishna, prem prayojan, to attain prem, which is the ideal that we seek through the medium of chanting, that golokera, premadhan, harinam sankirtan, right? Natam says that from Goloka, the prem has been exported to the material world in the form of nam sankirtan. So to derive prem from the name, then this is what he's talking about. It's not that the name will have no effect without the right attitude, without receiving it from the guru, with the guru's blessing and so forth, and having that the nam dharma, the theology of the name being explained to us to help us and so forth. All those things are there the name chooses to reveal himself in that way, and features of the name are coming out of the name, so to speak, through the medium of the guru and sadhus and so forth. So it's not that the name chanted in any way without, any conception even has no benefit. but it will not give you the benefit of prema in and of itself, is the idea. So if it's thought that if we hear the name, see the Sankirtan procession, and accumulate, even unknowingly, influence of bhakti unmukhi sukriti, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur referred to it. This will gradually build up and sprout like a seed underneath the ground, above the ground, in the form of faith in the efficacy of the name, and the need to take shelter of a guru and learn how to chant and with the right attitude and so on and so forth. So there is some benefit, but then in the context of practice, once one's done that, if one is not cultivating a service attitude, one must not be paying attention to what one is doing, and so it will not be fruitful. There's a spirit behind the chanting. Seva mukke hi jivado swayameva spratyadaha. This is the statement from the Purana. Without citing the verse, Srila Maharaj is referring to it. So to chant with a service attitude, then this will bring prema. So he's advocating for sadhakas to emphasize to do so consciously with the right attitude and so forth. But it's not that he's saying that chanting otherwise without that has absolutely no effect. In other places, he said, chanting the name with an offensive attitude can result in going to heaven in your next life. Right? Chanting without offense, but only an abhas of the name, a shadow of the name, by way, for example, of joking, parihasya. Oh, did you see those hairy Krishnas? They don't have any hair. So that might be, an example, modern example of nam abhas. So it's possible by the power of only a shadow of the name, without any offense attached to it, one could achieve mukti. So it's not that Srila Maharaj isn't aware of that. He's emphasizing, if you want to attain prema, then this is the way. Are we adding something to the name? We're only adding the way in which the name calls for its the name properly understood, which is not from Krishna, mandates from us. I mean, he's great. We're small. He's the enjoyer. We're not the enjoyer. We're the servant. So to be enlightened in that regard, the knowledge that I'm the servant, and chant in that way. This is the idea. As far as those who are chanting, like he said, and they have other desires for puja, for being worshipped, be adored, for other things and whatnot, this may be the case. Puja, labha, pratishtha, those are obstacles, no doubt. But it's said that we repeatedly chant the name, and then we'll overcome them. So there's some benefit, regardless of how we chant. But in order to attain the full fruit of the prema, the dhan, the wealth of Goloka, it's prema, through the medium of the name, which is Krishna coming in a very compassionate form, then it's important to emphasize for persons who are pursuing that. Seva mukke jivado. Swayameva spratyata. Then it will manifest from that kind of chanting. Just like Mahaprabhu says, well, you chant with a humble state of mind, tolerance, expecting no honor for yourself, honoring others, and so on. It's not adding something. This is all nam dharma. So I hope that helps. What else?
So the next question is from Amrita here in Brighton. She's just come in now. Amrita Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare.
Please, will you elaborate on verse number 6 of Gurvastakam by Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakura, as much as time allows?
There's Nikunja Yuno Ratikeli said. Well, I'll tell you some things that Prabhupada said about it. How's that?
Brilliant. Yes, please.
Okay. Prabhupada was asked by Jayapataka Swami. Now, you know who Jayapataka Swami is, right? Jayapataka Maharaj. In, I think, 1969, in a letter. So it's available to read for yourself about the verse. The verse speaks about serving Radha and Krishna in the Nikunj. So it's a Madhurya Rasa setting that the verse speaks about. It says the Guru is expert in participating in the Rasa Lila, or the romantic lilas of Radha and Krishna, secret ones, Nikunja, unseen in the forest, and so forth. So Jayapataka Maharaj asked if this refers to the fact or the idea that the Guru is in Gopi Bhav. And Prabhupada replied, he said that this verse is written by Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakura about his own Guru, who is in Gopi Bhav. But the spiritual master is the servant and agent of Krishna, either as a Gopa, either as a Gopi or a Gopa. That's how Prabhupada explained the verse. There's another instance too, and we think if I can recall it, where, excuse me, I can't recall the details, but another instance where he said more or less the same thing, that it's a very peculiar response in one sense, that the spiritual master, in regard to this verse, is either a Gopi or a Gopa. Now, it's curious because the dominant emotion in the Gaudiya Sampradaya is Madhurya Rasa, and a particular kind of Madhurya Rasa, Bhavolasa, or sometimes referred to as Manjari Bhav, to become like a handmaiden of Radha, and thus be involved in assisting in the intimate lilas of Radha and Krishna, the romantic lilas. So for Prabhupada, every time he was asked about the verse, he said, well, it could be a Gopa too. It's not the typical answer that you would get. And it's indicative of his own bhava, if you combine that with every other evidence to as to his internal life and ideal. It stands out the way he answered it. And now, how does that work? How do the cowherd boys get involved in romantic leelas of Krishna? Of course, there's a type of cowherd boy that does. The most prominent amongst them is Subal, right? And so these type of cowherd boys, their Sakya Bhava is embellished by an influence of Madhurya Bhava, Madhurya Rasa, which facilitates their participation in these leelas, and without whom they couldn't take place any more than they could take place without the participation of Radhas, Sakis, and Manjaris. In fact, that type of bhav, as it manifests in the Gopas, is called Saki bhav. It has an influence over the cowherd boys that enables them to, these particular type, to interact with the romantic life of Radha and Krishna without being attracted to any of the girls themselves. So their kind of maleness, if you will, is somewhat covered over in that regard. Otherwise, they're pretty male, even in those leelas, in the way in which they participate and so forth. But they're soft and not like alpha males if you will, which enables them to participate and lend a sympathetic and empathetic ear to the plight of Krishna during Radha's man, or to Radha's complaints about Krishna, and to take her side in arguments at times, and so on and so forth. So these friends participate in those lilas also, and those lilas are very central to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. You know, the window, the prakash, through which we are to enter, as is described in the Bhagavatam and in the Lila Granthas, the texts of the Goswamis, their Lila narratives. The setting is, is largely the forest. Krishna's there all day on the plea of, being dharmic and herding cows, and which is an excuse for playing with his friends, which is an excuse to be able to take off at midday for a few hours and meet with the gopis with a few select friends. And so it builds like that. And these two bhavas are very, very central to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because Krishna has fallen in love with the sisters of all of his friends. So they're pretty connected. Therefore, the Sakya Bhava and Madhurya Bhava are very compatible with one another. Whereas Dasya Rasa is not compatible with Madhurya, and it's not compatible with Sakya. Dasya is neutral to both, but they are compatible, and so they have the capacity to enhance one another. Gopi's Bhava may be enhanced at times, as Jiva Goswami explains, mixed with Sakya Bhava, which enhances their Madhurya. Then they can have a wrestling match with Krishna. But you find Radharani sometimes wishing she could be a Gopa. There are several beautiful lilas in which this is brought out. It's an overt desire to be a Gopa, but if you look carefully underneath, it's a desire to have a facility within the context of her romantic life with Krishna that's not available to her, given the parakiya nature of that bhav. She can't walk hand in hand in public with Krishna. She wants to, like Subal can, arm in arm with Krishna. But I wish I could be like Subal. What she really means is, I wish that the facility that Subal had to walk arm in arm with Krishna, I could have. So this way, the Sakya Bhav will have an influence on the Madhurya Bhav and embellish it. And it may work the other way also, as I already explained. The Madhurya Bhav can have an influence on these type of sakas, friends of Krishna, which enables them to be sympathetic to his romantic life. Whereas another friend might just go, what's with the romantic stuff? I mean, we got cows to herd, kind of. So this is the way Prabhupada has explained the verse to include his what I would say is his own bhav, and of course to serve, the verse does, as a description of the inner life of the guru, which is then followed by sakshadharitena samasta shastra. Kintu prabhoya. However, kintu prabhoya priyevatasya. The guru is non-different from Krishna, sakshadhari. Kintu, but he's dear to Krishna. How can you be non-different from Krishna and be dear to Krishna, right? So this explains how he's non-different in equality, in a spirit sense, in a representative sense, he is. But he's a servant. He has his own. He has their own bhava, inner life, that was touched on in the previous verse. He's taking it like this. Does that help, or did you have a particular question about the verse that I didn't touch on?
No, that's wonderful elaboration. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. You're back in Britain, huh? Back in Britain and Brighton for a
short time.
Okay. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Nothing wrong with Brighton here, but the bright spot in Brighton is where they talk about these things.
True, that is true.
Okay, what else? Oh, time's up. Time's up. Well, nice to spend the morning with you, morning for me. And I appreciate those of you who come at other hours of the day and night to participate, and to all those who listen to the call as it's recorded and played out on YouTube. I really appreciate the opportunity to answer questions and have your association. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Haribol. Guru Maharaj ki
Jai.
jai. So yeah, thank you everybody who sent some questions in when we were calling out, but obviously nice expansive answers there. So next week you guys will be first, and then yeah, please let us know through the week if you have any other questions, and we'll add you to the list.